lot like a Delver deck with some synergies that let you bounce creatures in order to get value.
So this is nice. Joe starts on Tundra Go. No one knows. And then turn 2, pre-land drop cast Ponder.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is the nicest bait and switch.
You know, we're across the room from them, but I feel like I could hear Joe saying business as usual as he put the Tundra down.
Well, especially this play, right? Ponder, I'll wait till turn 2.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is the stuff where it feels like he's trying to bait a daze here.
So John Job, so the Dimir Ninjas deck, a lot of ways, do you feel it plays more like a value, like some of our value 2-color decks, or is it more of a Delver strategy?
It's much more of a value strategy than a Delver one. It actually looks like Job has kind of cut the Delvers that used to be prominent in the deck to lean a little bit more heavily into the fact that you just get to return these creatures with Enter the Battlefield abilities to your hand with the ninjutsu mechanic.
All right, so what value cards are we looking at then?
So we have 1 Vincer Shaper Savant for the hottest spice. Then we see Spellseeker, which lets you search your library for other cards. Baleful Strix, which it's hard not to love a Baleful Strix if you're a Legacy fan. And finally, Snapcaster Mage.
Not too bad. Among there, right, 16 creatures, so fair amount there. And then it looks like for Disruption, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Hymn to Turok, a Fatal Push, 4 Force of Wills.
Right, and so this deck is actually very similar to the Dimir midrange deck that we saw from Rudy Brixa running Thief of Sanity a few weeks ago in our Legacy Open, where the idea is you just try to grind your opponent to dust and then have a couple of creatures that build you right back up to where you were before with all the cards where your opponent does not have as many cards.
Yeah, on top of that, when we had that team event you're talking about, players were really prioritizing, or rather in Legacy, basic lands, having a large stack of basic lands in their deck, which again, this is going to do.
Exactly. This is one where you're going to have the benefit of just getting to play a lot of Magic, and there's even a point where you benefit from having a higher land count than other decks do by the fact that you get to play Mutavault.
On John's side, completing a Brainstorm to set up his hand, he's fetched up 2 Underground Seas and goes for Hymn to Turok.
Joe Lossette's a Legacy Miracles man. You're not expecting Wasteland.
Yeah, no Wasteland today either, even though he's not playing Miracles. And we'll see Joe, with the Hymn to Turok on the stack, is going to make a move with that Flooded Strand. And now things get interesting. Getting Underground Sea, that's something you don't normally see out of Miracles.
Can you hear Joe groaning from here? Oh, I've been had.
Yeah, and Joe, that's the one, man. He's going to use Brainstorm to hide some cards from that Hymn to Turok. See Aether Vial picked up there. That is a 4 of in Joe's deck. His deck is 22 creatures of his own.
Ooh, this is a nice combo. You get to put cards that you want to mill with Cephalid Illusionist on top of your library with Brainstorm. That's just good synergy.
All right, the Hymn does resolve. 4 cards in Joe's hand. Yeah, and if you're noticing, Joe appeared, he was on a mulligan to 5 there. I know when he laid out the cards with Hymn to Turok, I was thinking, normally I'd expect to see a couple more cards there.
Yeah, exactly. And this is kind of the spot where, even on top of the Underground Sea, now that Job hit this Aether Vial with Hymn to Turok, you know something's up.
Right, yeah. Aether Vial is not, I mean, you don't play it to just flash in your Vencers and Vendilion clicks out of Miracles.
Exactly. There's a point where you could go, well, maybe he's playing Esper Control or splashing Toxic Deluge instead of Terminus. But no. Aether Vial does not go with those cards.
Especially the Cabal Therapy, which is the other card to hit off to Hymn to Turok. Outside of Cephalids, I mean, at this point, there's no deck that's on the radar that plays all these cards.
Exactly. There's a point where you could think maybe there's some sort of Dead Guy AL deck that's trying a black-white aggro strategy that plays both Therapy and Aether Vial, but those decks don't play Ponder and Brainstorm.
Back to Joe we go. This is Nomad's Encore.
The jig is up.
All right, Nomad's Encore. That one is a 1/1. As we mentioned this one earlier when talking about the matchup. A Core Nomad Soldier. It has the, for 0. The next one damage that would be dealt to Nomad's Encore this turn is dealt to target creature you control instead. It could target itself. That doesn't really...
You know what? I think I know what it's going to target, Matthias.
I think it's to target the Cephalid Illusionist. So this is the combo we are talking about. And so Cephalid Illusionist, when it's targeted, a player puts the top 3 cards in their graveyard library into their graveyard. And Joe is going to repeatedly do this.
You technically don't have to do your entire library. Here, he may just be looking to hit all of his combo pieces and leave himself a couple of cards in case it bricks.
Yeah, so here is one Narcomoeba. He plays 3. And he stops there. Not too much to worry about on his side. I suppose Force of Will could mess with a Dread return.
Right, and that's what Joe's playing around here. You already have creatures in play that can flash back your Dread return as it is. You just need to make sure it resolves.
Yeah, Cabal Therapy targeting Jonathan Job. We'll get those life totals back up for you in a second. Collective Brutality, Baleful Strix, 4 lands.
Not a whole lot going on here, and there's a spot where Job pausing there may have been him considering if he just wanted to concede.
Yeah, and I think on Joe's side, Job said he knows he's dead, but wants to see how. You know, he may not have played this matchup ever.
Exactly, and the Lawless Giant is a recent kill condition being added to this deck. Used to it, it was some very convoluted Angel of Glory's Rise or Flankin Zealot fueled combo where Angel of Glory's Rise would bring back like an Azami Lady of Scrolls and a Lab Maniac to draw the last card in your deck and win on the spot.
The very last card in Joe's deck was the Dread Return.
That's a good spot for it.
Not too bad. He'll Dread Return Lotleth Giant. When it enters the battlefield, your opponent, I believe, takes 1 damage for each creature in your graveyard. That is going to be enough creatures.
That is a cool 20 creatures. 22 total creatures on his deck, 2 of them on the battlefield.
Job is counting. All right, how much am I taking here? He is at 18. You know, Lotleth Giant's also a 6/5 for 7. Nice card, an uncommon.
Well, you know, the stats don't do very much when you don't have a library.
Yeah, we need to play like Dragon Breath and get it for haste.
You know what? No, we don't.
But he had the Baleful Strix, so good call. Which
exactly.
Is
Exactly.
And that's going to be the combo. Yeah, Job confirming, yeah, that just happened.
And this is exactly what happens with these kind of decks in Legacy. You know, we like to joke about things that don't show up as frequently for not being meta decks, but they're still very powerful. He just won on the 3rd turn on a mulligan to 5 through a Hymn to Torok.
Yeah, and what a way to kick off the Cincinnati Open here. Joe Lossett picking up a win over on the Legacy table with Cephalids. Now, on our other matchups, we mentioned the modern matches between Paul Muller on Is It Phoenix and Christopher Iaali on Humans. And then Tom Ross, of course, playing mono white in Standard. He is up against Justin Porchas on Simic Nexus.
And these are all matchups that are going to be pretty swingy. None of the decks are exactly surprising. You come with a plan for the opponent. As far as edges in those matchups, we're probably giving the nod here to Paul Muller on Is It Phoenix, as you get to play a pile of red removal backed up by Thing of the Ice. And Thing of the Ice is just going to undo a ton of work in terms of development that the Humans player, or that, Christopher tries to put in. And then the Simic Nexus is going to be very favored over Ross's mono white aggro, just because Tom Ross's deck doesn't have all of the blue tools that we see out of the Azorius decks.
Yeah, that is one of the matchups where it can get closer. You know, you're not going to see Disdainful Strokes and Negates. He will go toward things like Demystify to try to hit a Wilderness Reclamation or an Azcanta, but certainly not as powerful as the blue cards there.
Yeah, other than that, you really only have Tithe Taker that does very much interacting. Tom Ross does have, say, Adano Vanguard out of the sideboard to be more aggressive, but other than that, he's just looking at things that shore up some of the fairer matchups that aren't going to play very well.
Yeah, he's actually on the Tithe Taker main and no Vanguard's main, which plays well against a lot of the red decks, but is going to hurt him here.
Exactly.
In the meantime, let's look at some of the sideboard for our legacy match between John Job and Joe Lossett. So, Joe Lossett's sideboard. First of all, I want to talk about the creatures. If you missed it when he was milling over there, he had 3 Stoneforge Mystic in his main deck. And that doesn't sound weird, except for the fact that I'm telling you there's exactly 1 equipment in the main deck, and the only equipment is Shuko, which is an equipment that equips for 0.
Ooh, that's another way to target your Cephalid Illusionist.
That is another way to target yourself with Illusionist. Now, out of the sideboard, as you see here, we now have our graphical sideboards this weekend. There are a couple more traditional equipment in the sideboard. He has a Batterskull and an Umezawa's Jite to go with the 4th copy of Stoneforge Mystic. Other things he has here, these Flicker Wisp, Echoing Truth, Cabal Therapy, Meddling Mage, Fairy Macabre, Orzhov Pontiff, War Priest of Thune, and if you aren't familiar with that second one there, that is the card Devout Witness.
That card is nice. That card's very nice.
Yeah, a 2/2 for 3. It's a Spell Shaper for Disenchant.
Ooh. I like that effect. Not necessarily for this matchup unless you're trying to destroy exactly Baleful Strix, but that card's mostly coming in to answer things like Chalice of the Void, Pithing Needle, etc.
So what do you like then against the Dimir Ninjas deck? I mean, both these, first of all, one deck's totally off the radar, Joe's deck, and Dimir Ninjas is a very new deck as well.
So here, I think you're mostly just trying to stick to your Game 1 plan a majority of the time. The things that you could see Lossett looking into bringing in are possibly leaning a bit harder into the Stoneforge Mystic plan in order to fight disruption that he could expect Job to be bringing in. So this would involve the Stoneforge Mystic and then the more traditional equipment package in Batterskull and Umezawa's Jite. And then past that, you may just be looking into Cabal Therapy to tag any counter magic that you could see coming from Job, just because there is a very high risk of Job letting Lossett combo, countering the Dread Return, and then Lossett dying on the spot.
Yeah,
so you lean harder into your hand disruption against the blue decks as a result of that.
Which makes sense. One of the reasons why Cephalid was always a popular combo is that it actually is really hard to disrupt with removal, because the entire thing is instant speed. You know, once the Nomads and Cephalid are down, a Fatal Push isn't going to save you at all.
Exactly. So you just want to use your more proactive disruption in the form of hand disruption to hit their reactive disruption.
All right. We'll get to John Job's sideboard in a second, but meantime, I want to talk about the spring sale at Star City Games. It is our weekly sale, but we have discounts on all sorts of things at the Star City store, so make sure you check that out, starcitygames.com/sale. I like the Gilded Lotus is on there, just in time for spring.
That's so cute.
Well done. Well done.
Big Gilded Lotus fan. I am the biggest Closet Commander player.
What other flower cards?
There are lots of Lodi, Lotuses, Lotus Sea. Lotusin.
You can get some Colony Heart Expeditions.
Ooh. Carpet of Flowers.
Carpet of Flower. Floral Spasm. Sour. Spore Flower.
Ooh, that one's nice.
I like it. I'm going to go straight for the fog effects.
Does Pollen Lullaby count?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a nice one.
I know where that was
Sometimes
going. It's two fogs.
Tangle, yeah. Well, it's sometimes Tangle. Tangle was too strong, so they put Clash onto it. White can't just have Tangle.
It was too busted in green. Why not just put it in white?
John Job's sideboard. A lot of possible answers here. So I'm looking at these 3 Surgical Extraction, wondering just how much work they do against the Cephalid deck.
They're a good thing to look at. And they're part of the reason that we saw Lossett milling one at a time rather than just saying, I'll flip my library into the graveyard, is you don't want to put yourself in a spot where all of your Narcomoebas get surgically extracted, for example, or yourself in a spot where Job gets to surgical extract your, say, Dread Return with the Narcomoeba triggers on the stack and so on. And that card is a lot of the reason that Lossett is probably going to be leaning much further into a fair game strategy, or just trying to take out surgical extractions with Cabal Therapy.
Looks like this time it is Jonathan Job on the mulligan. Also, teammate Tom Ross, where Job does pick up the Game 1 win against Justin Porchas.
That's a pretty nice swing.
Yeah. It's a matchup that actually I don't mind from Tom's side. The mono white decks just can race here. The cards that I'm always concerned about out of Simic Nexus are things like Biogenic Ooze, something that's cheaper and just as game-winning as the card Nexus of Fate.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's also a point where even if Justin's deck is favored, it does have a fail rate. And if there is a deck in the world that's very good at punishing fail rates, it's any of the aggressive decks, specifically in the hands of Tom Ross.
Porchas' deck also no copies of the ooze I was mentioning here has gone for Murmuring Mystic instead.
Murmuring Mystic is nice just because it doesn't die to Lava Coil. That's a big draw
Yeah.
to it there, is it's much more resistant to removal in general. And a lot of those threats, if you're jamming them, you want to be able to block with them as well, and Mystic just does a better job of that than the Ooze does short
that's
term.
going to help him in the red matchup, so it may cost him a few points in the white matchup.
Absolutely. Those birds are pretty insignificant in the face of
An army of
Benelish
5.
Marshall.
Yeah. Looks like Joe has kept on 6, and here we go for game number 2. Stoneforge Mystic here from Joe. Wondering, do you think it's just has Shuko, or he has the GTAs with it now?
At this point, I would assume he's leaning into a fairer game plan, just because you know that Surgical Extraction is something a good chunk of decks are going to have out of their sideboard.
Sure.
So you want to make sure you're not just cold to it.
Yeah, it might be the kind of thing where he boards in the Batterskull and GTA in almost every matchup, just for that reason.
Exactly. And it could vary in some matches where you just need to race and combo as best you can. This is something like Storm, for example, where the Batterskull is just never going to matter before they get to Tendrils you. But against anything fairer and slower, you may just need to lean into this Batterskull plan.
Turn 1 Aether Vial from Lossett. Did not have one last game. He'll get to play out with it for this one. Last game, all we really saw out of Job was him to Turok. Not any threats hitting the board, unless you count Baleful Strix.
That is a legal Magic card.
Yeah, I mean, it resolved, and then he never untapped.
Listen, that Baleful Strix is doing its best.
It did it. Yeah, and it did its best. It drew that card.
It drew a card, and it had Death Touch. What more do you want from it? You're lucky it'll perform for you people.
Aether Vial up to 1 for Joe. A lot of lands actually still in the hand to go with the Vial.
And that's kind of the problem with the card Aether Vial, is even though it's a very powerful card, it ultimately is just a very fancy Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, it is mana. And here is Cabal Therapy from Lossett. I don't think there's an obvious name here.
No, a lot of what you're probably looking to name is just anything that Job could be using to try and disrupt your combo, as those are the things that he's going to be the most worried about here.
Update here, a quick 2-0. Tom Ross is the winner. Now, Joe, Cabal Therapy, he names Liliana the Last Hope.
We have a single copy hanging out from Job.
Okay.
And that's just the card that, if Lossett doesn't have an answer, could end up snowballing the hardest.
Oh, sure. That, especially out of his deck. I mean, he gets to mill for 3 when you Last Hope the Illusionist.
You're so right, Matthias.
Yeah.
You are
so really,
correct.
Really, I think he's okay with Liliana. I can't see how that would be a problem.
But here, you can assume that Job realizes he needs to take a more control-y stance in the matchup, and if you're planning to play a grindy game, you're mostly just trying to take the things that are going to be more than a +1 and snowball an advantage that you can't just outgrind, and Liliana is exactly that kind of card.
Top cards from Lossett were a Brainstorm, 2 Brainstorms and a land. He actually intentionally draws the land and leaves the 2 Brainstorms on top. He did see him to Turok in Joe's hand, so he's trying to keep the bad cards in his hand as he ships the turn.
Exactly. Very heads-up play here, where he knows he doesn't have access to the mana anyway, and if Brainstorm is the card you're drawing to, it's going to find the next card down anyway. If you're planning on putting some lands back in your deck as is, this is just some medium to long-term planning on Lossett's part.
Ian Bayer and Andrew Braswell to the stage, please. Ian Bayer and
Joe, we're going to
Andrew
end step.
Braswell to the stage.
Use this Brainstorm here with a fetch land. Does want to set up some pressure. His deck, as we mentioned, is a bit more of a mid-range deck, so he doesn't want to drag things too late in the game.
Right, and this is a strange spot that you'll end up with Brainstorm sometimes, where you cast it expecting to want to put some cards back, and then you end up with a bunch of nice cards. And unfortunately, he does need to hit his land drop here, so he's just going to have to shuffle away some other powerful cards.
Yeah, it looked like he actually had to shuffle away a copy of Counterspell, which is, I think qualifies as a good card in this matchup, though he's looked at the Aether Vial on board and decided that it was a bit weak.
Exactly. That's the spot where this card is good, and it does beat the Dread Return and the like, but you've got to imagine that Lossett has that covered and isn't just going to fold to it, especially when Lossett knows it's in his hand.
Yeah, he saw it with the Cabal Therapy.
Exactly. Counter Magic in particular is so much worse when your opponent knows how much of it and which counter spells specifically that you have.
Yeah, back to Job we go here. And part of the thing with Brainstorm can help, when your opponent knows your hand like that, it does put some uncertainty into things as to which cards Job actually still has. Top 3 shows another counterspell and 2 lands. Not ideal.
No, and this is a spot where Job may feel priced into keeping the cards because he just wants to hit his land drops here. It's whether or not he wants to try and shuffle his library after he hits those lands. It looks like an Underground Sea and a fetch.
Yeah, okay, if one of them is a fetch land, but there's a lot of... That looks pretty appealing here because it's fetch land, Underground Sea, Force of Will. Yeah, I want all land. I don't really want the other 2.
Exactly. This deck's very interested in hitting its first 3-4 land drops and then just drawing gasoline from there. And he's still in the developmental phase of hitting those first 3 or 4 land drops.
Yeah, even though he's not Thief of Sanity, a lot of these value cards, Spell Seeker,
it wasn't a
Snapcaster
fetch
Mage,
land.
it was a Mutavault. So that's why he was thinking long about it.
So this is actually pretty nice, even though it does force him to keep those cards on top. This is a way for him to at least apply some kind of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, right, you can start it by attacking in for 2, though this Aether Vial threatens that a little here.
One of the benefits, well, we'll say benefits for Job, downsides for Lossett, is that Job did get to look at Lossett's entire deck last game. To get a bit of an idea about what cards Lossett's going to be vialing in for 2. So if all he has on his radar is Stoneforge Mystic, this Mutavault attacking is clear for takeoff.
End step from Job.
Is this a Snakecaster Mage?
There we go, it is. It is just the 2-1 Ambush Viper. And yeah, he is trying to get that pressure down.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Attack. We are attacking...
Thinking about it.
This is one of the heads-up plays where you know someone really knows how to play Legacy. Whenever they go, oh, I just need to get you dead because I understand if I give your combo time, it will go over the top of anything I do. So just sacrificing some value for the sake of creating damage is such a heads-up play.
And attacks in, and here's the reason, because he had Ninjutsu. So this is Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow.
Do you like Dark Confidant triggers?
That's going to be important. So whenever a ninja deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library, put the card into your hand, and they lose life equal to your mana cost.
Oh, yeah, it's better than Dark Confidant.
Yeah, it's...
Do you know what
Go ahead.
Do you know what the cost is going to be for Joe Lossett? This greatness at any cost? It's going to be a 5-mana Force of Will on the top of the library.
Ooh.
Remember how he stacked that
Yeah,
Ponder?
that is a 5, isn't it?
That is pressure, if I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
And now Job even has this Snapcaster Mage back in his hand.
It feels way less like a Snakecaster Mage when you're doing this to it. It's like cheaty, It's like when you ambush Viper the Snapcaster, you're committing to a 2-1. But not here. It's just...
Baba Booey.
A swing for 1, a swing for 5 more for that Force of Will. And it goes into Job's hand. Now, there were actually decks built around Yuriko that were trying to almost like erratic explosion your opponent with this effect, right?
Right, and then people realized just having a Thieving Magpie that burns your opponent is, it's fine. It's pretty good.
Yeah. What was the cards they were using? There was like some 10-mana cards, right?
Oh, good grief. Probably
I saw some terrible ones.
Probably Emrakul.
I go straight for those decks.
Do you think they were? Do you think they were also Blazing Shoreline?
Draco, maybe.
Ooh, Draco's nice. You Wordly Tutor with the Yuriko trigger on the stack.
Yeah, just put Draco on top. Boom, 16. Yeah. But it showed down to 12. Yuriko hitting pretty hard there. Yeah, 1 plus the additional 5. I believe that 5 is the most that can be hit out of Job's deck.
That is correct.
But with cards like Brainstorm, he's going to just keep hitting it.
Ooh, look at this clean shuffle away the top of your Brainstorm.
That was nice. Right, so Joe, brainstorming, then Aether Vials in Stoneforge Mystic to shuffle the deck. We'll see what equipment he has.
He's thinking, so it feels like more than
Not
Shuko.
Shuko. Oh, no, it's Shuko.
It's Shuko.
Shuko. All right, so This is a card from Betrayers of Kamigawa, a 1-mana converted mana cost artifact. The equipped creature gets +1/+0. It's the reverse Bonesaw, if you will.
Old grabby, toothy hands.
Yeah, so Bonesaw, remember, is the 0-mana, the Cheerio artifact that equips for 1. This is the 1-mana artifact that equips for 0. They do the same thing.
Betrayers of Kamigawa just had the most busted equipment.
Look, we have ninjutsu on one side and Shuko on the other. It's just Betrayers of Kamigawa all over here.
Welcome to Star City Games Open Weekend in Cincinnati, featuring Kamigawa block constructed.
Yeah. This is actually just us at Betrayers. You're right. You were talking about shoals, we have ninjas, we have Shukos.
Umezawa's Jitty is probably hanging out in Lossette's deck.
That's a nice one. That's also Betrayers.
The format's broken. Kusari Gama was out of Saviors, so it's
I
not even
hadn't
legal.
been there. That's true. That's gonna be a rough one. That was actually the first pre-release I played. It's Betrayers of Kamigawa. You got an Ink Eye, Servant of Oni, as the pre-release card.
Uh-oh.
Another Stoneforge Mystic here from Joe. I want him to get second Shuko. I know it's not in the list, but
Come on, Onaganada.
he'll get the Batter Skull. Or the No Dachi.
Oh, God. Do we need to get a judge down there? That card's not legal.
Wait, Onaganada, he can't put that on any of his creatures.
It's in Saviors.
Right, that's when it only can go on creatures with power 3, and then they get like 3-0 and trample.
You put 2 Shukos on a Stoneforge Mystic.
Oh, and then it can hold the Onaganada.
Good grief, you got to think about all the angles.
That one was hit. We have a Diabolic Edict. Being hit there, not of much consequence. Now, Joe's actually held the Shuko still in his hand as opposed to casting it here.
Right, and basically the idea is you don't want to expose it to anything until the turn you're going off. You don't need to commit the mana into the Shuko until you're winning anyway. This Vial will put the Cephalid Illusionist into play for free.
The Shuko is too valuable.
Listen, it's more that the mana being invested is too valuable, but also this Shuko is a valuable asset and must be protected as such. And now that he has this Batter Skull in his hand as well, this sets up a pretty nice block on this Yuriko here. You just get to threaten Batter Skull. All right, fine, attack, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, the Stoneforge Mystic that was sacrificed was the Summoning 6 Stoneforge Mystic, so this one is ready to go to put a Batter Skull and Germ Token into play. Which has given Job some pause. See a hand here. Force of Will, Baleful Strix, that Snapcaster Mage, both players know about it. He has access to some options in his graveyard, 2 cantrips and a Diabolic Edict.
Right, and Lossette's even really close to just hitting that 5th mana where all of a sudden you can't ever deal with this Batter Skull.
Oh, the Shuko is getting threatened here. It's him to Turok. Joe gonna have to... Oh, Batter Skull. Batter Skull put into play.
I got to level with you. This is just reasonable.
Okay.
If he had put the Shuko in, you would have seen me throw my headset down and assume that I am not smart enough for this job.
All right, four cards. We can only hope that Shuko makes it out.
Come on, please, Shuko.
No! Oh, wow. Just GG.
Hitting the other Aether Vial is a trade-off, though. We take those.
Batter Skull into play, gets the Germ Token. Fatal Push takes care of the Germ Token. Yuriko is going to swing in another card draw, a trigger. That is the Spell Seeker. Ooh. That's 3 more damage.
That's a good hit, too. That lets Job tutor for more cards out of his library to basically just find whatever piece of the puzzle he needs.
So
also very nice to bounce with the ninjutsu ability.
Don't mind that either. Now, there's Ninja the Deep Hours in here as well. I was just checking.
There's also Mutavault on the battlefield.
No, but you can't ninjutsu a new Mutavault.
That's true, but Mutavault does trigger Yuriko.
All right, Yuriko triggers off all ninjas.
All ninjas.
That is nice. And Joe down to 8. That was another swing for 4.
Yeah, this card is not that far off from Gurmag Angler whenever your deck is
When it's
going.
connecting, yeah.
Exactly. It's usually hitting from something in the range to 3 to 6 points of damage.
5th land for Joe. He has the option of equipping Batter Skull here. Joe down to 7 here. Update Paul Muller, a Game 1 winner over on the Modern table.
This 5th land looks like it's going to be that Batter Skull equip, and that's the point where it's actually just pretty big chunks of life that he's swinging for.
Yeah.
Kamipa's in Lossett's hand.
Now the issue is that with all these extra cards on with Spellseeker, right, it's just figures that right, Spellseeker can get Fatal Push, can push away the Stoneforge Mystic. There's not... It's not great. Vials in Narcomoeba and Cabal Therapies. I feel like it's going to be Spellseeker he names.
It's got to be. Either that or Force of Will.
I guess there's also a Snapcaster Mage in hand.
Yeah, there are a lot of good hits.
We need like 2 more therapies. But this one will be good. He does take the Spellseeker.
Oof, and a Baleful Strix being the leftovers here is kind of
bad.
scary.
Yeah. Joe can equip the Batter Skull here, but Snapcaster Fatal Push is a play that's on the board and also very powerful.
Right, there's a spot where what Lossett may look to do is just play a bit of damage control by bouncing the Batter Skull right now and passing, because this sets up a situation where you can just put Stoneforge Mystic in front of Yuriko.
Okay.
Or force Job to just commit more mana.
All right.
Oof. That is another Force of Will picked up by Job.
All right. Batter Skull back into Joe's hand. Stoneforge Mystic looking to redeploy that as we go back to Job's turn. The reason this is just a way to get another Germ token.
Basically, that's it, and it also puts a spot where it forces Job to commit mana into something like Mutavault in order to have an attack that gets through Stoneforge Mystic. As Yuriko is only a 1/3, so it can't just attack into Stoneforge. So if you attack, you just block and go about your day.
I guess Job can't just Snapcast a Fatal Push here, right?
Correct. If you Snapcaster a Fatal Push, then you can just put in the Batter Skull, and then Yuriko doesn't connect.
Right.
It does set up the situation in which, since Job picked up this other Force of Will, you can just counter the Batter Skull on the way back down if you have another way to deal with the token, say the Baleful Strix we know about.
Yeah, well, I mean, unless it gets Stoneforged into play.
Right, no, it's more about eventually the Germ will get dealt with again, and then you have to bounce the Batter Skull to recast it, and when you recast it, it's more of a long-term plan.
I see, yeah, down the line.
It's an avenue.
Right, once the Stoneforge is dead, then eventually he has a way set up. That makes sense. We do see, and actually Job's going to go a different route. Instead he's going to use that Snapcaster, it looks like to just use snap a Ponder.
Right, and this makes a lot of sense considering the fact that he knows Lossett plays cards like Cabal Therapy. It's not super safe to play this 3 or 4 turns down the road plan to answer this Batter Skull when you know that Lossett could just take both of the Force of Wills in your hand with a Cabal Therapy.
Uses Ponder to find a land, casts Baleful Strix, and passes. Joe will put the Batter Skull back into play.
All right, Baleful Strix is going to come in with another big life swing. That's the big thing that it's going to be doing here. Trading with this Baleful Strix is pretty nice, considering that Job is tapped out right now. This means that neither player really did anything that mattered this turn, and Lossett just gained 4 life and took away one of Job's cards.
Back over to Job we go. So he's set up this Baleful Strix from last turn. I mean, this is going to just still be a source of damage, I suppose.
Well, he did just cast it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it looks like Job is pretty interested in aggressively trading off Baleful Strixes for Batterskull tokens.
Him to Turok. That's going to force the Batterskull back into play. 2 cards remaining in Joe's hand. He'll get them both. It is Ponder and Aether Vial.
And all of these hymns, while they have been 2-for-1s, they've hit Vial Shuko, which doesn't feel that great.
Yeah.
And the next one hit the 3rd Vial, which Lossett obviously has no interest in casting in a Ponder. So there's a point where it's literally a pair of 2-for-1s, but it really didn't feel that way.
Yeah, and right now, Batterskull continues to go to work for Joe, hitting in for 4. But now both players to 15. And, ooh! Oh, this is a card that plays. So this is the one of Shaman Encore, I believe. Or is that Benevolent Bodyguard?
I believe that's
That's
Benevolent
Bodyguard. My mistake. Yeah.
How could
yeah.
you?
Yes, he does have a one of Benevolent Bodyguard.
This is protection against Fatal Push?
Yes,
this is nice.
this is a one of Mother of Runes activation. Sacrifice it to a creature, gains protection from a color of your choice until end of turn.
Most importantly, a Mother of Runes that doesn't have Summoning Sick.
Right.
And if we're being honest, how frequently does Mother of Runes really get used that many times to protect from removal? Twice?
It
then the Mother of Runes dies.
yeah, twice, right? It never actually happens.
Yeah, yeah. It just kind of threatens
That's like-
it while the other person has their head in their hands.
That reminds me of, like, how often does Royal Assassin actually destroy a creature?
You're dating yourself.
I know, I know. The answer is only when you have Icy Manipulator.
Ooh.
And then that was the lock.
The old Bone Crank.
Back when Ice Age was a set, your Icy Manipulator Royal Assassin decks, those were nice. Those were not fun at Kitchen Table Magic. See.
Are we just entering a new era where people go, well, back in the 90s?
Yeah. I don't need to have a new era to start doing that. Here's a swing and here's a ninjutsu, and this is going to be a big one. So Ninja the Deep Hour is put into play for Baleful Strix, and when this connects, there's going to be 2 triggers, one off Ninja and one off Yuriko.
This is a big swing.
And you put the Baleful Strix back in your hand. This is so many cards. Okay, so 2 damage, then 5 more off Force of Will, then another card off the Ninja. So Joe down to 8. John's going to draw 100 cards.
Good
More like 3, but
grief.
1 and 2 off the Ninja, and here's the 3rd off that Baleful Strix he bounced. And go. Yeah. A reasonable turn.
I believe the phrase has something to do about asking your opinion of these apples. How do you like them?
Yeah. Ooh. What is your opinion on these apples?
People want to know.
An attack. A block with Baleful Strix. Joe bounces the Batterskull back to his hand. Back up to 12. Here we go. Ninja only had flying for the 1 turn. It sailed in on a Baleful Strix.
And this is a spot that, at least from the set side, you're alive, but you're treading water.
Like, there's this one thing you can do, and you're doing it every turn, and it may or may not work. Joe trying to hang on here in the second game. That round timer here is accurate, which may come up with the way this game's going.
This is not the deck that I would expect to go to turn 100.
Yeah, now the issue is that Joe's team, if no one finishes any more games, Job, Muller, and Ross win the round. So with 11 minutes left, Joe needs a 2-game comeback from Christopher Iaali if this doesn't finish.
That being said, with this Batterskull, this game does have the potential to just take that long, where it feels like Joe's just treading water, but that's all you need to do when you're up a game.
Right, his life total's going up. I mean, Job has so many cards here. I feel like Job's deck is firing on all cylinders, and because of that, I expect it to have a way to deal with this, but so far he hasn't.
Batterskull is just a really hard card for the fair decks to deal with historically.
Okay. Yeah, another swing in for Lossett. Down to 11, up to 16. Snapcaster Mage from Job. Now, here's a worry I'd have. If Job can clear away the blockers for one turn, you know, he has Ninja of the Deep Hours, Mutavault, Yuriko, he will...
Oh, you just burn Lossett out.
Yeah, they all trigger. So Snapcaster on Fatal Push. And Lossett will use Benevolent Bodyguard to protect the Germ Token. Another Snapcaster in Job's hand. Is there another push in the graveyard, though? I don't think so.
There is a Baleful Strix.
Okay.
And that, with another Yuriko in Job's hand, there's a point where even though you don't want to just pitch cards to the Legend rule, your Yuriko's not doing that much right now. So if you just get in with this Baleful Strix, which already drew you a card anyway, and then turn it into a Yuriko, that's 2 more cards between the trigger from the Yuriko and then the Baleful Strix getting recast.
I'm almost wondering at what point he can just start throwing all the creatures into the attack here, letting one of them die to the Batterskull, and then just ninjutsuing things into play. It's not unreasonable.
No, absolutely not. And there's also a spot where it's hard to say who's actually ahead here, where Job's deck is firing on all cylinders, but it's fighting a fight that Lossett's deck isn't.
Blue-black is not particularly well-equipped to deal with a Batterskull.
Exactly.
Here's a Diabolic Edict off a Snapcaster from Job. And Lossett, oh no, does he have a 2-drop in his hand?
Tell me it's a
He
Narcomoeba.
does. It's another Stoneforge Mystic. Job was really hoping to get one of these 2 creatures with that Diabolic Edict, but he's not going to. And more Betrayers of Kamigawa. Here's the Jite. And Jite, if it starts connecting to this Germ Token, that could actually...
That's a way back in.
That's a way back in for Joe.
Yeah, that's a card that Dimir decks do not have the ability to really interact with. And it also just is a card that snowballs when you have a card like Batterskull that Dimir also can't effectively deal with.
And I'm not even sure it's right to say it's a way back in. You know, Joe's been treading water here, but it's a way to pull ahead. If he starts getting Jite counters, this board will turn in his direction.
Exactly. You attack once, and all of a sudden you get to kill 2 Snapcaster Mages for free.
Yeah, a lot of text on him was always Jite, but text is actually, you know... If this card gets counters on it, win all creature, win the creature war.
Exactly. There's even a spot where even if you don't end up grinding by killing creatures, you can just pump your Batterskull and it's never getting double blocked out of combat. You can kill other creatures. You can gain life. The pumping alone is worth life on its own.
And... I believe this is our Shaman. From Joe Lossett. More ways to protect the Germ Token. Yes, this is Shaman Encore. In a 1-2 for 2, it has that Encore ability. So 0 mana, the next one is damage to be dealt to Shaman Encore is dealt to something else. It can throw damage away from itself. For 1 and a white... The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to a target creature. So for 0, Shaman gives damage from itself to something else, and for 1 and a white, it takes the damage for something else.
That's pretty nice.
So in this sense, it for 2 mana can protect the Germ Token. I feel like that's what it's doing here.
Right, and there's even a point where if you use both abilities together, you can just send damage wherever you want.
Yes. Now, what actually happens is it got a Force of Will out of John's hand.
Yeah, that's the type of card that... It is the avenue for Joe to win the game out of nowhere while down 10 cards.
I also like that Shaman Encore is a Squire.
Look, so is Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, Stoneforge Mystic, by the way, is the most flavorful Squire. I believe it's a better Squire than Squire because it comes and brings you your weapon, which is exactly what a Squire is supposed to do. Squire, fetch me my Jite.
Okay, so this may be the turn.
Yes. Okay, what do we have going on
here? You just
here?
attack with everything.
So the Jite's on the Stoneforge Mystic, not the Germ Token. I was a bit surprised here.
This is just hedging your bets a little bit against a card like Fatal Push.
Joe's tapped out.
Exactly. You can't just redeploy the Batterskull mid-combat this way, but this is also the best way to protect your equipment from a card like Hymn to Torak. There is actually a point where if Job just alphas, he might be dead on the crackback. Well, I guess Lossett only has 5 damage now. There's no Shuko he can tutor up.
Yeah, it was just tragedy that got hit by a Hymn to Torak.
And as funny as this sounds, Lossett's only 1 mana away from casting Lotleth Giant. And that card just burns you out of nowhere. Alpha!
And a swing in here from Job. Do want to mention there is a 10-minute time extension on the modern match here. So if you're following along here and wondering if this is going to get into some weird end-of-round stuff, that may complicate things. But the full alpha swings in here, so 3 Snapcasters, a Ninja of the Deep Hours, and a Mutavault. Now remember, both those other ninjas, if they hit, will trigger the Yuriko.
Right, and there's a spot where it's pretty easy to just block the Ninja of Deep Hours. It's whether or not you want to block with your Stoneforge Mystic. And the big upside to blocking with Stoneforge Mystic is you do just get counters on your Umezawa's Jite.
Right. So, looks like the Germ Token stepping in front of Ninja of the Deep Hours. 4 other attackers. It feels like there's got to be a Ninja in Job's hand to make this attack, right?
Absolutely. We know that Yuriko is hiding out in there. So we're likely looking at bounce one of the Snapcasters that's unblocked for a new Yuriko.
It does feel like that hedging of his bets, whereby Joe put Umezawa's Jite on Snapcaster, not the Germ Token. It feels like he's being punished for that play here. If the Jite were on the Germ Token, I think he would just say no blocks with the... and he didn't end up blocking with the Stoneforge.
Right. Oh, it looks
he did.
like
Okay.
He put it in front of Mutavault, so it saves him from drawing a card.
Okay.
He knew the Stoneforge was going to die anyway. Umezawa's Jite is good at picking off Snapcasters. Lossett's just trying to pick off the ninjas.
Yeah, it's going to finish off that Mutavault, most likely on end step.
Exactly.
But he did lose the Stoneforge Mystic this turn.
That's true, and that was one of the things that's been the best at keeping Lossett in this game is the fact that he can return the Batterskull to his hand from the battlefield and then redeploy it in the same turn cycle. And Lossett has to draw a couple of lands to do that again.
Yeah, Lossett only took 2 damage there. Gained 4 off the Germ Token, and then took 6 from unblocked creatures. Job recovering here with a Brainstorm, says go. Lossett finishes off the Mutavault and gets ready for his own turn. Gonna try to connect that Jite to the Germ Token.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine that Job has to chump block.
Yeah, we kind of said it before, once this starts picking up Jite counters, I'm just not sure this matters.
Yeah, this is how Lossett goes from parity to firmly ahead. Because at the end of the day, Job's grindy deck, the way that it grinds is with its creatures.
And I want to say here, just kind of on the Ninja deck in general, I was pretty impressed by Yuriko at some point in this game, but the fact that he's not been able to stabilize against Stoneforge Mystic and not a lot else is a real concern to me for the archetype.
Yeah, we saw what those hymns hit from Lossett's hand were just a bunch of blanks, and Job's still falling behind here to what was effectively just a couple of Stoneforge Mystics.
Right, Lossett's deck played Stoneforge and a bunch of cards that didn't matter. Now, imagine this is the same game, but Lossett's playing Stoneblade instead. This is only going to get worse.
Exactly. It's a spot where, maybe he doesn't have Benevolent Bodyguard, but other than that, it just doesn't matter very much.
But it's not over yet. Job's going to swing in for 8, and Lossett looks to start picking off some of these creatures. He could get all of them.
This is an awkward spot where he may have wanted to actually pick off the Snapcasters before combat. Oh, yeah. He can just shrink the Yuriko so it doesn't take damage
Yuriko
there.
ninjutsu's in. Now, Job does get to pick up a Snapcaster, so that is a nice win for Job.
Exactly. So if you had done it before blocks, you could say pick off 3 Snapcasters, put your Batterskull in front of Mutavault, and then Job doesn't have an avenue to pick up or an opportunity to pick up a Snapcaster.
Lossett uses 2 Jite counters to kill a Mutavault. That would be a ninja. That makes sense. Job responding. Down to 5. Right now, a Snapcaster Mage is being blocked by the Germ Token. Lossett has still not gotten new GT counters for this turn. This is all still before damage. And this one looks like it's going to go to time with Lossett up 1-0. So that's going to be scored as, if Job cannot win here, it's going to be scored as a match win for Lossett.
Correct. And but it looks like he might actually just win this turn.
Yeah, he might just outright win it.
Yeah, right now, as it stands, Job is dead on the battlefield. Oh, he has a Snapcaster in his hand.
And yeah, Job extends the hand. Yeah, I think John Job concedes there, knowing he cannot win in extra turns, and the judge mentioned that was time in the round, which means we bring things to Modern. Now, Modern is going to Game 3. They do have a 10-minute time extension. So that clock is running. I imagine they'll start the game with something around 7 minutes.
Right, and this is one of the defining matchups of the format, the human stack versus the Is It Our